Okay, hello everybody and welcome to the Kubernetes 1.24 release retrospective. I will be your facilitator today. My name is Lachlan Evenson. Hello and welcome everybody. Before we get into it, I'm going to go over just a few ground rules and set a few expectations for this meeting, but I do want to welcome you all first. This call does fall under the Kubernetes Code of Conduct and will be recorded and posted. So the Kubernetes Code of Conduct says just treat everybody kindly and with respect. We will be posting this recording to a public YouTube link at a later date. So if you miss it or can't make it all, feel free to pick up the rest there. Now, a few other ground rules here. How this meeting works. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm walking through here. Just give me a second to do that. Okay. Let me know if you can see that. Looks good. Okay, excellent. So yeah, retro meetings. If this is your first retro meeting, Kubernetes, we run them very specifically. So we're looking for respectful, solution-oriented communication. This isn't a blaming or shaming. It's about working together to make the process better for all future releases and to be, retrospective about the work that we've done. So I would ask everybody to mute when they're not speaking. Feel free to raise your hand if you need to ask a question. But as I step through the document, I'm going to be calling out specific individuals that have placed items on this retro doc. And you are free to obviously speak without raising your hand. If you need to ping me privately, feel free to do so while I'm conducting the meeting. But we do, as Joe said, have a tight turnaround. I do want to thank James and Joe for inviting me to facilitate this conversation. And I want to say a special thank you to Ray, who I see has slipped his name in there for scribe. Feel free to grab the gold medal emoji, which I've been using for scribes for other ones. For other meetings, you get the gold medal for scribing. Thank you, very much appreciated. So I'm going to be trying to time box these conversations. So let's go through what we have here, but I might have to cut people off and play the, the Oscar music when you need to get off stage. Just that's to get through the meeting. I mean, no disrespect by pushing this meeting forward, but there is a lot of content here. So I will interrupt and let you know if we need to keep moving. First order of business today. Did I miss anything? Anything before we get into it?
No, but we're doing
okay.
It.
Thank you. Okay, so first off, we're going to look at the previous retro follow-up. So we're going to spend 10 minutes to looking into action items that were assigned out of the 1.23 release retro and get an update from individuals as to where they are. So if they're done and there's no further work needed, you just brief explanation will do it, but I'll go through each item here. So we have Ray, update lead handbook with the following. Ray, you provide an update there?
Yeah, so the lead handbook has been pretty much updated heavily, not only to reflect the 15-week release cycle from 12 weeks, also with the addition of more clarity on calendar access and the Kubernetes release calendar, adding to provide human spaces towards the end of the release team meetings that's not recorded. Make sure deadlines are on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, no Monday or Friday deadlines, and also on how to ping the, pinging the scalability on call person 2 days in advance in the public release CI signal Slack channel for an update and to update the release team agenda on the status.
Excellent, Ray. Anything else outstanding there?
Nothing for me.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Hossein, I have update CI signal handbook.
Hello, everyone. So I think I have the first item should be through as I was I was leading the CI signal in previous release. But like really deep updates, I think Leo can provide more because now he's leading the CS signal, and I'm sure Leo is in the meeting. Leo, can you give us more insight?
Yeah, sure. So the first one is done. There's another pull request currently open to update the handbook, but this is not finished. It's under discussion. But what is basically pointing out here that we want to update the handbook to mention the KDEV mailing list. This is done. And we also sent the report in the KDEV mailing list. So that's done.
Excellent, thank you. And next we have Hossein again, a CI signal tool update, C project board.
I think still Leo taking care of all these topics. So Leo, it's yours.
Yeah, so there's been progress on the CI signal tool. Actually, a couple of PRs have been already merged, so that's good. But so as you can see, a couple of points are done. But for example, sending the report to the KDEV mailing list automatically, this is in progress or it's planned, alongside some other topics which are also in progress. Everything is on notes or in issues, and you can see it on the project board that I referenced.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Leo. Next one, SIG release chairs and tech leads add clarity on when is the best time for an enhancement to be a major theme and guidelines around what should be a major theme. Have anybody representing the release chairs there?
I don't think that we have discussed this at a SIG release meeting yet. I'll add it to the agenda for the next one. I'm creating it right now so I can add it in. I think this is a good thing to discuss. I don't know if we have really good hard and fast guidelines around what a major theme should be. I think it's kind of driven by the SIGs themselves that are bringing the features forward to help to kind of determine what those are. So I don't think this is like, I don't think this is a hard and fast, like SIG release is going to decide what the major themes are. I think the SIGs that are responsible for the capabilities are really going to drive that. But I'll add it to the agenda for the next discussion so we can have some more active.
I would add a +1 to this. And then also, I think that Lucas just cut the ticket or maybe the placeholder PR for the discussion around major themes. So this is very apt for us right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy, for stepping in there. Jesse, update comms handbook with the following. Do we have Jesse?
Yep. Yeah, these are all done.
Excellent. Thank you, Jesse. TBD status is pending. Add a second RC to the schedule. Would anybody like to speak to that? That's coming out of 1.23.
Just to add some context, for 1.23, only a single RC was scheduled, but we did need to cut a second RC towards shortly after that. So what was discussed in the last retro was to adding a second RC to the schedule. Believe this should also be brought up in the release engineering or with the branch manager for 124.
Our release calendar actually has 2 RCs on it. It has an RC 0 on Tuesday the 5th of April and an RC 1 on Friday the 15th of April.
So when put down notes, the 124 release does have 2 RCs scheduled.
Thank you. Next one, Ray, Jesse, Nate, 1.24 lead, status pending, discuss docs deadlines.
So just some context to this. We always have an issue with docs in terms of getting the placeholder PRs in time to meet the deadlines. And we've had the placeholder PR deadline before code freeze and after code freeze. It's always a struggle, no matter what. We tend to have better response with the docs placeholder PR deadline after code freeze because contributors want to work on their code to make sure that it gets in before code freeze. That's the current state in 1.24. It is after code freeze, but it's always an ongoing issue with the docs placeholder PR deadline and also being shortly after code freeze. And after that, the other docs deadlines fall in place shortly after where the docs are needed to be reviewed and are ready to merge. I did bring up the possibility of having folks, when folks do opt in for a documentation update for a release to create the placeholder PR right then and there. But I could see that how that's hard to maintain because that person may not work on the documentation. So when they make a placeholder PR, it just really just a placeholder, but someone else might actually have making a real PR for that documentation change. Anyway, just open up to Jesse and Nate for their thoughts.
Nate has his hand raised.
I tend to agree. I think that having it after has worked well enough. In the case of the developers not being the ones to write the documentation, I agree. And in this case, we're actually having, we've got an umbrella issue around the Docker shim removal. A lot of the documentation needs to be updated around the Docker shim removal, which actually reduces the capacity of the community to do the reviews and the writing of the what would be regular KEP placeholder PR opening. So I think that it's a struggle. There's a very tight turnaround, and it's a concern, but I'm not entirely sure I know of a solution. I'm not sure that changing the deadline or having a separate sort of, I mean, we sort of already have a separate docs freeze deadline. So I'm not entirely sure how to solve this, other than to try to recruit more folks into the reviewing and writing pipeline.
Thank you, Nate. And Ray?
I just also want to add some context. 123 is the release that's comes in, and that came in towards the end of the release. The release towards the end of the release calendar always has tends to have more issues with docs deadlines, because a lot of those docs deadlines are always taking place around major or US holidays like Thanksgiving, KubeCon, Thanksgiving, and also then we end up being close to the Christmas holiday. So those US holidays and KubeCon NA kind of always plays a factor in the last release of the calendar year.
I see Jesse's hand. I will say only one more minute on this topic before we move on. Thanks.
Just in response to that, I mean, that said, 124 was, I think, pretty smooth, especially compared to some of the other cycles that have been really difficult. I think this is just 123. Sorry.
Yeah.
Still foggy. 123. The one that came at the end of the calendar year, to Ray's point, is that sometimes that can be challenging. We did okay with it. I think generally this still needs to be discussed. I think for the purpose of this, you really can't ask people to write docs before the code freeze. It's just very difficult. They're trying to write the code. It's typically the same people. So I'm okay with that being the decision. I think we should just drive a decision on this so that it doesn't keep coming up. I guess that's my
I think plus one to that, I think.
And I have a lot of similar thoughts to share about comms as well for that, but we can jump to that later.
Thank you all. These final two here are with Jesse. First one is review KEP receipts.
Yeah, both of these we can skip right through. They're still status pending. I lost February and now I'm still buried. So there's still things that I'm interested in digging in on.
Okay, excellent. I will go ahead and say the last one. Work with SIG docs to update instructions and also have a mechanism to sync the instructions. You don't have to respond. I was saying it more for the recording. Excellent. Thank you. That concludes the section of our follow-up on action items from the 1.23 release. Next up, my favorite section of retros is what went well. As we go through these, just think to yourself, this is congratulatory. Take a moment to appreciate the work that the team's done. And this is a great way to have feedback. So if you have other things, feel free to add them here too. It's great to speak positively about your experience and share that with others. So first of all, we have Grace. Large enhancements came in. Grace.
Yeah, so we had 91 enhancement prior to code freeze, and that's, I think, the largest we've seen it, and I think that speaks a lot to the growth of the project.
Excellent. Congratulations, 91. That's amazing and daunting for me. I worked on 116 and I think we had 30 odd, and I thought that was a lot. This is 3 times as much. So congratulations. Leo, the new CI Signal GitHub project boards are great.
Yes. So last release, we thought that 2 new project boards would be very useful for us, and it turns out they are very useful for us, and they are being used basically by the entire team. And I only heard great feedback, and I think that was a great improvement.
Excellent. Thank you, Leo. Great to hear the progress on the project boards. Leo, again, I like the release status summaries every Monday from James.
Yeah, this is like more general comment. Yeah, I really liked the weekly basically just summary from James. I think it was very useful to keep track of the release and what happened last release and so on, last week. Yeah,
I'm glad people liked it. I think it was actually Ray's idea. I think I remember talking to Ray at the end of the last release. It's like, you should do this. So I did, and it's worked out pretty well, I think. So I'm happy people like it.
Love it. I love the positivity here. And I also see Adolfo in the chat saying plus 100 to those summaries. So good work. Great ideas there. Good work, team. Joseph, coordination with RT leads in selecting shadows completed on time before scheduled kickoff meeting.
Yeah, I was, I'll be honest, I was a little nervous taking on this role and just this weighty responsibility of helping these teams build diverse teams. And just everybody's responsiveness made it really easy. The individuals sometimes that I went back with, providing my perspective and feedback on how to kind of like balance our teams out. Everybody was really welcoming to the feedback. And the great thing was we were able to get everybody, even though despite the holidays and coming out of the holidays, we had everybody on board before we did our first kickoff meeting, but sometimes we do kind of straggle along. So kudos to everybody on making this, the leads, making this go very smoothly.
Excellent. Thank you, Joseph. I know that's a massive achievement. It's not an easy one, so congratulations. Nate W., the new Docs team board has been very well received by the Docs team and has helped us see and fix issues with the tracking sheet. It is also easier to track and see the status of the Docs release at a glance.
Yeah, we had some issues with the tracking sheet in 1.2.3, and I wanted to see if we could try a new tool to solve some of those issues. And so far, I've been very pleased with how the board has managed to help us out in that. It's also a very helpful reporting tool. I generally link it in every status update and whatnot. We went with the old version of the Kanban board that the that GitHub. Sorry, I got Docker shim on the brain. Rather than the new version, because it's able to sort of link issues together. So as you add, let's say, the KEP, you can also add the placeholder PRs and whatnot, and it makes things fairly straightforward to just. It's like literally like a posting note. It's been very, very helpful, and I'd recommend moving forward that subsequent teams look into how we can sort of formalize this. I took a shot at doing it, and I think it's been a good tool.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Nate. Next up, we have Max. Already mentioned it, but needs a strong +1/honk for the CI Signal efforts on implementing a new project dashboard and reporting, as well as the Monday release summary of James. So it's another +1,000. Max, would you like to add anything there?
He wasn't able to make it to the meeting.
No worries. Thanks, Max. Next up, we have Lucas. KREL improved by removing an SSH error. Also, handbook improved. YouTube walkthrough inbound. Lucas.
Yeah. One of the shadows, Carlos, made a YouTube video of a walkthrough of using KREL to push draft PR. And then there was an SSH error going on with the release notes process or subcommand in KREL. And that was a pull request fixed that as well.
Excellent to hear. Thank you very much, Lucas. That concludes our what went well in 1.24. Feel free, this is a living document, to add things as you think of more things that went well, but it was great to hear all those successes on the team. Kudos to everybody. Next up, we have the what could have gone better in 1.24 section. So like the last section, I'm going to go through and call out individuals that have typed things here, and please unmute and give your feedback or any additional context. Thank you. First up, we have Grace. Stiggs mistakenly that adding the milestone means it'll get picked up by the enhancement team. Grace.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how the miscommunication happened here, but essentially, I think a Sacred 2 just tagged the milestone, and they expect that to be on the spreadsheet, and that's not how we operate. And there's been some confusion there, and also the fact that like a lot of people can add milestone, whereas we only want sick leads to contribute to what KEPS is included. Yeah, I'll go on to my second point here too, because it's kind of along the same line, amongst like the fact that the enhancement team really need automation because we're hitting the upper bound on what we could manage manually.
I think this is a
Thank you.
perennial topic. Like every release, I think everybody comes away thinking there should be a better way of doing this. And I don't think we've gotten to the answer about what the right way is. I see a couple hands. Sorry, I jumped in.
No, it's okay. That the hands weren't there, but I see Ray.
Yeah, so it's this brings about the KEPS receipts process and KEPS ETL, which yeah, hasn't really been brought up again, but I think it needs to be brought up again. And
Eddie?
So we've said for many releases that we want a better tool than this spreadsheet with a bunch of app script that Jesse goes in there and magically fixes somehow. We can get funding to do this, right? Like, let's get a funding request together, talk to steering. They can go get funding from the CNCF, get some contractors, and build the tool we actually need, right? Like, this is something we absolutely can ask for. So let's talk to Paris.
Thank you, Eddie. James?
Everyone hates this spreadsheet. I have wanted to get rid of that spreadsheet since I first started working with it on the release team. We mentioned the receipts. I think the big problem here is that everyone agrees that the current process is crap. But the two kind of things is that any change is change for the community, and we don't want it to change things too much, too fast, because then people get even more confused about how they're supposed to do it. And there are a lot of people in the community who want to fix this. So I think if we can agree on a way forward, we can do it with or without funding. But of course, getting funding is, great. So yeah, I think that this is something that we need to bubble up to SIG release again to fix.
Thank you, James. Jesse?
Just to follow on this, I agree with what's being said. I think it's important to understand that there's maybe a disconnect between sort of what Eddie and I were talking about earlier, where we should build a new tool and KEP receipts being the answer. The part of what I'm supposed to be looking into is the KEP receipts as an implementation detail of a better solution. So that's what I'm supposed to be kind of driving the conversation on. So that sort of the action item from before is directly related to this. I just wanted to call that out.
James, do you have an additional point? Or just a hand
No,
stuck
I just
in air? Okay. Okay, Nate, do you have an additional point?
Yeah, this was part of the rationale for trying the board system with the docs team to see if it would work. I think it has. I also want to give a big +1 to Eddie's suggestion of talking to Paris and getting funding. We may not need, there may be tools that exist that can solve this issue. But if there aren't, then yes, let's look into how we can get things changed up.
Okay, I see a few more hands. I'm going to time box this to a minute, this topic. So Ray.
Yeah, +1 to seeing if new tool. Also, we have a tool, and I know some folks will say that we have a tool with KEP-CTL and KEP receipts. I think we should identify what if there are any gaps with that tool, what needs to be worked on, or if it should be totally refactored, or do we need a new tool?
Jeremy?
Yeah, so I think the main thing that has blocked this so far is getting agreement on what the workflow should look like and who does what and what are the responsibilities of different places. And that's where we've kind of been hung up. So like there was a proposal to enhance KEP-CTL to do some things via a receipts process that met like a whole bunch of headwind. People thought it was too complicated. There was too much work. So I think that like, rather than going to get a tool built, we really have to figure out what that workflow looks like. And maybe consultants can do that. Like maybe we can hire some people to come in and figure out like what the workflow looks like. And then like, maybe, ThoughtWorks does this kind of thing. Like, hey, they can come and they can figure out what the right workflow for this looks like and what the right requirements are for doing this. What's going to make the people, doing the work here happy. Like people are unhappy that they have to go and stick things into a spreadsheet. People are going to be unhappy probably doing any extra amount of work if it's not well thought out and well intentioned. And I think that's where we hit the roadblock before. And I think everybody hates it. Everybody wants something better, but we don't have consensus or a group of people that have been dedicated to getting that understood and figuring out what the best ideal path forward is. Like figure that out first, then figure out the tooling afterwards. People first, then processes, then tools.
Okay, I'm going to continue moving on here. Thank you for all that feedback. If you'd like to add anything else. Oh, somebody just, it's coming back. Hang on. All right. Next, we have Xander. Enhancement owners are still unhappy with the spreadsheet. Is that a different topic?
It's not a different
Xander?
topic, but if I may just add one quick point, I think right now, due to the pain with the spreadsheet, it's widely recognized we need a different solution, but there are a lot of community members that have been feeling some pain for this process that I think maybe don't know or haven't fully realized like how much we're talking about behind the scenes and the conversations that are happening. I think we maybe need to send a communication out to the mailing list at some point in the near future to just acknowledge that, like, hey, we hear you, we see that this is not a perfect process and we're working on it. Like, I just want to make sure people feel heard and know that we're seeing the struggle that they're having, and that we're gonna work on it. And that said, I'll end there. We can move on to a different topic, but I am sensing maybe we need a dedicated meeting to talk about this subject, and maybe we can do an enhancement sub-project, but yeah.
Thank you, Xander. I will call out some things that I read in chat right now. +1 to Xander, coming from Grace, +1 to Xander coming from Nate. James said, can we create a working group, a formal Kubernetes one to address this? And Grace said, I feel like the enhancements working group under SIG Arch is it, James. So just some other additional context there for the recording. Thank you very much, Xander. Next up, Leo, improve follow-up of already opened issues.
Yeah, right. So I noticed that this could be something which we should improve in the future, maybe with like the self-developed solution that we are basically developing right now, that we can have like an alerting to the to Slack. Or maybe I was also thinking about giving feedback to GitHub because we are using the beta dashboard. So maybe there would also be possible to have like some reminder or something like this. So if you have a note or like an issue, that you have a new like column option, a reminder option, something like this, that would also help. Yeah. In general, I think this is like still manually kind of difficult to remind yourself. I opened like an issue 2 days ago or a couple of days ago, and I have to go back to that. So like some reminder would be very useful.
Thank you, Leo. Ray, do you have a?
I don't.
Okay, no worries. Putting your hand down in software is always something that's easy to forget.
Yeah,
Don't worry
sorry
about that. No, it's okay. Any comments or questions on Leo's point there? Okay, thank you, Leo. CC, corner case for things not tracked by enhancement but need doc in current release. For improvement on existing alpha features, we don't track enhancement, but documentation will be required. CC.
Yes, that's exactly like I said. I was running into the corner case and I was discussing with Nate, the doc lead. So the currently way it works is enhancement team will take care of putting all the tracked enhancement into the spreadsheet, and documentation teams will use that same spreadsheet for tracking the documentation if it's required. But I was running into this corner case, which for some improvement on the existing alpha feature, we don't have a tracked enhancement in the tracking sheet, but the documentation will be required. So it will it sounds like a gap to me, and it might miss tracking. So that's it.
Thank you very much, CC. I see Nate's hand.
Just to follow up on that, the way I think I've dealt with this type of thing previously is to just personally subscribe to it as a docs person, to watch it, to make sure it goes through. In this case, I'm curious if we should, because we've got the new board, I'm wondering if we can add a new column to it, something along the lines of untracked, just to make sure that it is publicly being accounted for.
Excellent. Thank you, Nate. Ray.
Just to clarify, this is for any alpha features, but they're not being tracked because they're not graduating, but they're being worked on to need some new.
Yeah, that's it.
docs.
It's not graduating to data, but it's adding context.
Yeah. So since it's not. I guess it is part of release, but not tracked part of release. So yeah, I think what Nate said is a good suggestion, but like, how do we do folks still opt into that, or do we just monitor PRs that are milestone for 124 or doc PRs? I don't know if there's going to be like a set process on how this, because it's not exactly a tracked enhancement.
Yeah, this was a problem previously in 123. There's with the docs part, there are sometimes situations where docs need to be updated even though there isn't a cap, and so there's a requirement to track those and watch them. And this is where I'm saying I have previously, and on this specific case that CC brought up, I've subscribed to it personally, but we don't track them sort of publicly, and that's where I'm wondering if we should add a column to this board. And they've not generally gone onto the sheet previously because it's not a cap and the sheet is 4 caps. And so it's a bit of a hole in the system right now.
Yes,
Excellent.
It makes sense to add a column maybe. And the other thing is like the owners of the feature might not be aware of they should update the release team about that. So that's easy to get things in a hole, as you said.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, CC. Eddie has, when master blocking jobs are failing, please blow leads up on every channel. Eddie?
Yeah, this is something I wish I had been told when I was on CI Signal a couple of releases ago. Don't be afraid to start DMing leads that aren't responsive when their jobs are failing, because the one that I just fixed the other day had been going on for a bit, and I get so many GitHub notification emails, so I miss all those mentions. My GitHub notifications itself is so hard to follow because there's so many emails just can't be followed. So every lead, I'm sure, has their own way of that they like to be communicated with. So you have full permission to just start hitting them on every channel. So keep doing it. You're doing a great job.
So I might disagree there. I'd say like keep the or feel differently. I think you should try to keep the communication focused. Like make sure that you're hitting main channels first, right? As a lead personally, I don't watch any of the most of the release star channels, right? So release CI signal enhancements, all of that stuff. I don't watch it unless I'm pulled into it, right? So first and foremost, like if something is failing, go to the main channel. So either SIG release and release CI signal. You also like, in addition to getting to the leads, you want to be seen getting to the leads, or it needs to be seen that they are not being responsive, because that is a different problem, right? So just make sure that like when you're doing these communications, that it's also as public as possible in the agreed upon channels first. If you want to go to DMs just because you think it might be higher signal, fine initially, as long as we're pulling people back into the channels.
Yeah, I get that, but my channel is super noisy with outside people coming in asking for support on stuff, right? Like API machinery is impossible for anyone to follow. So yeah, post stuff in the public channel and then feel free to DM that to the leads and be like, hey, just want to make sure you saw this.
Thank you, Eddie. Mickey, getting more feature and removals blogs, opt-ins, and placeholder PRs.
Yeah, so one thing that we've been seeing this release, and maybe it happens more often, but this is my first time doing the comms coordinator role, is just that we have a really big difficulty trying to get people to opt in to get their features or enhancements in as either part of the removals blog or as part of the features blogs. And so I don't know what the best mechanism for doing this is. Again, in theory, it's opt-in. People should be reaching out to us as soon as we make these spreadsheets available to them. But in practice, with the exception of SIG storage, everything has required a ton of prodding. I mean, I've had to go and work with my shadows to go into every single SIG channel and ping people directly with, even a list of all their potential enhancements for their release as a set of bullets in the message. So I don't really know what the best approach for this is, but it'd be great if we could figure out some other mechanism for engaging people.
Jesse, I see your hand.
Hey, yeah, I need to drop, but I wanted to hang for this one. Mickey, I just want to call out, you've had a real hard time getting, not only getting like a balanced amount of contributions, but just like any opt-ins, other than SIG storage, who just brought it. They brought like 11 or something.
Mm-hmm.
For the last few cycles, I've not seen that. And I have seen quite a few opt-ins early. And then, as Ray showed me when I first started, you ping the SIG, maybe nothing. A couple weeks later, you're pinging again. People are like, oh yeah, cool. So I haven't seen this problem. And I'm not saying it's not a problem, but typically the mechanisms work better. And besides, I know it's been very challenging for your team and you're doing a great job. I don't know if other people have thoughts there, but I just wanted to throw out, I don't know if this is a persistent problem.
Okay.
Stephen, I see your hand.
Yeah, I do think it is a persistent problem. And I think part of what it comes down to is like you have a responsibility as a team, but part of what it comes down to is people have to want to do it. You should want to celebrate the work that your SIG is doing. There needs to come a point at which on the team we say, okay, we have tried, right? Because like we act as a centralization point for a lot of this work, but it's not just our responsibility. It should first and foremost, and that's part of the reason why this is an opt-in process. It should first and foremost be the responsibility of the owning SIG to report on their status. And after that, we do the best that we can. But if you have, and say something comes out, we do a feature blog and they're like, oh, that wasn't really accurate. If you had reached out and you're like, we did reach out multiple times and gave you an opportunity to refine this message. If that happens enough times, I think as a SIG lead, I would feel, okay, we need to make sure that like we're getting in front of this process, because the way the features for our SIG are being messaged is not the right way. right? Like they need to want to do this. This is not like so don't feel that it was a failing on your part. Like we've had this kind of communication issue with SIGs for years.
Yeah, I appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Thanks, Mickey. Thank you, Stephen. James, I tried to push as much public as I could. Did people like this? To spam me, to in the open, to impersonal?
Thoughts, opinions? So the reason I ask is because to give it a little bit of background, in previous releases, there's been a lot of use of like group DMs. I mean, you can't make private channels on the Kubernetes stack, but you can make group DMs, so people do. So in previous releases, I've seen a lot of that, which is fine, but and there are some topics that have to be handled privately. But a lot of it is just, that's where people talk. And I've tried to push things a bit more public this time. And I've noticed that people are a little bit, well, to me, anecdotally, people feel a little bit less chatty. I wonder if that's just a byproduct of this, if people feel like it's not a safe space that they're able to just chat. Is that a bad consequence of doing this? What do people think?
Just from the chat, and shout out to Ray capturing all the people in chat as well. So it looks like everybody is agreeing that the public was good and it was good overall. Stephen, is your hand raised? Is this a new raise or was it?
I just kept it up because I have opinions.
Okay. Okay. So I want to, just before we get into it, I want to kind of time box this one to about a minute or two so we can get through the what will we do differently. So please keep that in mind for everyone with their hands raised. Thanks.
So yes, I agree. I think, James, you reached out at the start of the cycle to ask if this was okay. And that is exactly what the channels are for. We have been called on the carpet by steering in the past for having communications and DMs. Do not do it. Do not do it. Like there are very few things outside of like sensitive HR type, things that you may have to escalate to leads that need to happen in DMs. Everything else should be in public. And you should try, like your teams should be working towards keeping them as in public as much as possible.
Jeremy?
I was going to say what Stephen just said. So I put my hand out. Just +1 to that. I think we should prefer to do public as much as possible. There's not much that needs to be discussed not in public, and like it's just not inclusive for folks if we're not doing things in public. If things fall to DMs, it's hard for people in the future to know what context was discussed, and it's just better, I think, just healthier if we do all these things in public. People can tune out too, right? Like they don't have to pay attention if they don't want to see them. So like I don't think we have to worry about it being spammy. I think it's the best thing to default to being public.
Thank you, Jeremy. I do see Mickey's asked a question. Do we have a second call scheduled? It looks like we might have more to discuss. And Joe has answered, we have another retro scheduled for after the release, which usually splits into part 1 and part 2. So there'll be further opportunity to discuss this, Mickey. So I'll see how far we get today and hopefully not push too hard. And then if there's anything that we want to revisit or re-add, we can do it in subsequent meeting. Thanks for asking that, Mickey. Appreciate it.
I have the drop, so if you get to mine, I'll add more context after the release.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you being here. Okay, what will we do differently in 1.25 and beyond? James, ask in the shadow survey which email they want to use for Google Docs, emails, etc. It might be different emails. I think that's any more context.
We just had this happen. Just someone wanted to use different emails for the two, and we didn't really account for that in the process.
And another element of that. So one, we're, the leads right now are talking about, does it make sense for us to continue using Google Forms for the shadow survey in general, or surveys in general? So once we have more, after we reach out to contributor experience, we'll let you know. The second part of this is like, I have I have like 1 billion email addresses, various ones because of just the amount of spam I get from GitHub. But part of this is if you are on a team that needs IAM privileges for like this is like I agree it's very important to do this. If you're on a team that needs IAM privileges for any SIG release resource that's on Google, right? Then we need to know which is the right one we should be granting access. So +1.
Thank you. And Ray.
Yeah, I think we could clarify this on the application process. I believe on the application form, it does state, what your email address, but we could also maybe have another field. If you have a second email, that'll be used for Google Docs, forms, etc. I think we could either add another field to this, or we could just state email address, then this will be used for, etc. for Google Docs.
I was envisioning just adding, instead of just asking for email once, ask for it like 3 or 4 times and just say the one for docs, the one for, the one for IAM, the one for emails. And most people will just kind of copy paste that one email between all of them because most people only use one for this. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, James. Leo, use the shadow application analysis tool, see repo. Leo.
Yes, so there's been, I think, a few times in SIG release engineering and SIG release, the discussion about this shadow application analysis tool, which now finally has been migrated. So it's under Kubernetes 6. The outcome of a couple of discussions also with contributor experience was that this is, I think, like desirable to create such a report. We should be very careful about not sharing any personal information, of course. So this also is related a bit to if we change the way how we apply to the team, this tool might also need to change. And yeah, from all the discussions I got, we want to use like this tool. So we need to think about how the report should look like and then add it to the timeline of each release. Yeah, and we also need to update the survey to basically mention the opt-in checkbox. So if somebody doesn't want to appear on the report, then there's an opt-in or opt-out. Yeah. Yeah. Any comments?
Jeremy, I see your hand.
Kind of piggybacking on what Stephen was just mentioning about like determining what the right mechanism for doing surveys is. We just did one for release cadence, and we ended up using SurveyMonkey, the CNCF's SurveyMonkey account for that. There's a couple of reasons, but like also having proper GDPR headers and stuff. I think as we're collecting some of this data, I think we'll feed into this, and figuring out the right way to do the analysis of data with contributor experience is definitely a nice way to continue pushing this along. I think the reports are super cool, and it gives a lot more transparency for folks to know like what the makeup of the teams are. And it's just good information to have in general. And I think as we kind of identify what the go forward path is with surveys, we can come back and revisit this and work with contributor experience to figure out like what the best long-term path is.
What's the, I guess, one, do we have a tracking issue for this? Because like, this is something that will happily fall into the cracks between release cycles. So one, if we don't have a tracking issue for this outside of just the migration, which is done, we should have one for like, what does this look like integrated into the process? And then two, what am I getting out of this tool? It's not immediately clear from the description.
Yeah. So we don't have issues for that. I can create some. So there are basically two things we get out of this tool. The first thing was basically what is also more or less the conversation with contributor experience about, is that we want to create a report for the community to show basically a bit more transparent who's applying and where we can adjust to include basically others and so on. So just a report. This is the first part. And the second part is currently it's quite difficult to select select the team because you have over 100 applicants or so, or more or less. So browsing all those applicants, it's quite difficult. So the second part is that it just basically produces for each team like a summary and then splits it so you can just browse it better. And yeah, so it's just helping.
It would be great to see a demo of this with anonymized data or dummy data.
Yeah.
And maybe we can schedule something for like a SIG release call and get into it.
Yeah, sure. I put this on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Leo, automated weekly CI signal report.
Right. Yeah, so currently we are again creating weekly reports and also pushing those to the Google development group, KDev. And we are basically working on automating this process. Currently there's one migration of the repository stack, but soon this one probably will be fixed. So then we can work on automating this process. So in the future, there are less like manual tasks which can be automated. So that's good.
Okay.
I think I'd mentioned in the past it would be good to have this as like, in addition to sending out the report, like let's solidify it outside of a Google group and into the repository, right? So like ideally you're writing into like the release team directory or something of SIG release. That way people can go back and scan the reports if they need to. And it'd be cool to see like, you know, if are we kind of analyzing this across time, right? Or are the same issues popping up?
No,
right? Like
not yet. No.
Yeah.
But with the tools, with the CLI and so on, we are basically laying a bit the groundwork for that. So yeah, we can keep this in mind and edit later.
Excellent. Any other comments on that one? Okay, in the interest of time, I'm actually going to stop us here because I think if we go into any more, we might risk running over. So Ray, do you mind just putting a visual marker in the document as to where we made it up to on this retro call so that when we come back for the subsequent retros after the release, we can continue. Is there anything else that people need to discuss before we finish up and wrap the first part of this retro?
Just wanted to say thank you very much for hosting and facilitating.
Absolutely, no worries. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. You can see that there is a part 2 and part 3 to be and TBC there to be confirmed. So please stay in touch. James will communicate out subsequent retros. I appreciate everybody's participation in making this retro successful and all the feedback and all the work that went into making this document, living document that we could discuss today. I do see Stephen's hand and then we'll close.
Yeah, so again, thank you all for participating in this. I like the fact that we're kind of doing these mid-release retros to get ahead of what we need to be kind of planning for going into the next release. One of the things that we've been talking about on the steering level is revisiting the conversation on like funding requests or you know, sponsorship requests for events, right? So I would ask, you know, for folks who are here and, you know, are maybe not getting funded from their companies to attend KubeCon, if that's something that you're interested in, like, please send me an email and we'll see what we can do. Right now, it's going to be a little ad hoc, but it would be cool to get like a batch of people. And SIG release, we had this ask from a while back, so I'm kind of trying to resurrect it and see if, like, yes, if there are so many people who are interested and not getting actively funded to attend and kind of, you know, get to meet people, show off their work, then we want to know about it. So feel free to shoot me an email. And that's Kate's K8S at auggie.dev.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. And with that, we close the first part of the Kubernetes 1.24 release retrospective. Thank you. And I hope all of you have a wonderful day. We'll get the recording link up as soon as possible. Thank you.
Later, y'all.
Everybody.